Ready to reduce your input costs? Let's start by extending your grazing season and reducing those feed costs or days spent feeding hay. Hey, I'm Shay and I host the Casual Cattle Conversations podcast. And today we are visiting with Chance from the Noble Research Institute, and he is one of their ranch managers. He also grew up ranching and really has an extended background in the topic, just like a lot of us, and experience in it. But we are really going to talk about what goes into planning for an extended grazing season, when to start doing that, some of the biggest factors, as well as a few different options to consider, and kind of some pros and cons of each. Remember that one of the best ways to support podcasts is to leave a rating or review. And when podcasters ask that, it's not really for selfish reasons. It's because when you leave a rating or review, that helps other people interested in this content find it as well. So help others find this content and help their own operations. So remember to leave a rating or review on whichever app you're listening on. But with that, let's visit with Chance. All right, Chance, we are going to be talking about extended grazing seasons for ranchers today and kind of some different opportunities that producers can look at. Thank you for joining me for this conversation because it's an important one.
Yes, ma'am. Thanks for having me.
So to kick it off right away, why is it so important for ranchers to have an understanding of how they can extend their grazing season?
The reason for the extended grazing season, I think, is for the money situation, saving money. I think hay is one of the most expensive feeds that you can feed, whether you're buying it or baling it yourself. It's still a big expense, and so I think grazing standing grass through the winter time can save you a lot of money in the end of the year.
So you are with our lovely friends at the Noble Research Institute. Go ahead and tell listeners a little bit about your role today.
I'm the ranch manager over the Oswalt Ranch. It's about 5,100 acres. It's pretty rocky, pretty rough, all native grass. So we run about 200 mama cows. We keep our own heifers every year and put those back in the herd. And we do a lot of rotational grazing, and the key to saving money expense in the wintertime feeding, you have to start with your summer grazes first. And so we usually, during the summertime, during the growing season, we usually try to graze pretty fast through there. We try to take the top third of the grass off and leave the rest in it, and it has plenty of time to grow back. So in the summertime, in the growing season, we're grazing pretty fast. We rotate the cattle every day or every 3 or 4 days. On my ranch, it's pretty rough, so some of the areas, they stay in there for a few more days. But so anyways, we try to graze all of the summer grazes to where we leave enough forage for the winter time. This ranch that I'm on, I think there's 51 pastures, and so we connect all the way around. It's kind of a horseshoe, so we start on one end and graze through the summer and go, and then usually when we start back over during the winter feeding, most of our grasses have caught back up, so we can rotate through all winter long on standing forage. We protein them pretty good with cubes or whatever, and we usually make it all winter long without feeding any hay, so it's a good thing. I think most people that when they're starting to look into winter, they look too late. They've already grazed most of their winter grass off too short, and it takes too long for it to grow back before wintertime feeding. So that's one of the main things is, and when you start out at the first of the year, we measure our pastures every month. So we go on our ranch, we measure about 80 something different pastures. So we measure our grass. So each month we know what we can run till the end of the year or till the next growing season. So we keep a measurement on that. Sometimes if you're getting too much grazed off, then you'll know if you need to buy more hay or you need to destock before wintertime. So
with that rotational grazing, I guess, how many breeding groups are you having, and then when are you calving, just so listeners get an idea of what your systems look like from that side?
We turn the bulls out at the 1st of June. We leave them on for 60 days, and we start calving right at the end of February, middle of March, something like that. But we start calving. And so by the time that we're calving and the summer grass is just coming on, we got a lot of winter grass to get through the calving season there. And then by the time we get into our summer growing season, the calves are usually big enough, that we can move faster, rotating our cows and calves through there.
So your approach to having an extended grazing season, you mentioned the first time you're going through those pastures is just to take the top third and move them fast so that basically the grass recovers quicker.
Yes, ma'am. I mean, sometimes, we've learned through the trial and error process. I've taken some pastures off too much before. Then when you come back around, there's not much regrowth in there. So, but we usually set up one side of the ranch or the other. If we're going to graze one side of the ranch for winter grazing, we start there at the first of the summer. And so we try to move pretty fast. Sometimes you don't. So, but there's a lot of things, just knowing when to get off your pastures to let them grow back and not. So we try to go pretty fast and take the top third or maybe half sometimes, but give it a chance. If you got 90 days of growing season still left on it, that it'll usually fully regrow, and then that's where we save up for our winter grazings.
So you made the comment that there are some things to kind of look at to know when to get off those pastures and move to the next one. What would be some of those?
We kind of see how much total forage we have in that pasture, but like most animals are, their favorite part, that's what they're going to be grazing on most of the time. So you might go in one part of the pasture that looks like you've got a lot of grass, and so you get on another part, and our pastures are probably, most of them are from 70 to 100 acres. So, and we usually try to split those off. So if you split them off, you can make sure that you get a pretty common graze across the whole paddock. If you just give them the whole thing, they're gonna hurt part of that grass, and some of it they're not going to touch. So by fencing that off, you get a pretty much even graze across there. But really what I look at is we measure the grass before we go in there, and then depending on how many cows, how many acres you have, they could last 12 hours in a spot, or a couple of days in a bigger spot. So we usually measure the grass, and when you look out across there, you can see if they've grazed the top third or half of it's gone, or way too much.
This system, very tailored to your environment, like you've talked about, and you've talked about you can get by with supplementing cubes or cake as needed when that time comes. What are some other extended grazing season opportunities that producers can look at who are maybe in different environments? Because I even think about, myself in North Dakota, we're getting more snow and ice than you are. So what are some other opportunities you see working for producers?
One of the main keys, and this is something that I grew up around. We was overstocked all the time when I was a kid, and so we kept everything grazed. So we tried to bale hay, buy hay, and put up enough. And so I think one of the main keys to any kind of grazing is knowing how much stock you need for what amount of land and for the amount of grass that you have. So I think that's one of the main keys in any environment. I know the weather's different in a lot of places. Even here, we've had some snows and stuff to where the snow's covered up anything they could eat. That you can make them hustle and dig through it, but we do some hay and stuff, in that particular. So I think it really just depends on which area you're in. Knowing your climate and what's coming forward in the wintertime, that's when you need to prepare, or if you don't need to prepare as far as hay. So, but I think the stocking capability of your place is the main key that you have to start off with at the first of the year, to know how many days you can go through there without extending your grazing, what pasture you have.
And so, how many days out of the year, approximately, or months, are you supplementing?
We're probably supplementing 4 or 5 months out of the year. You
Mm-hmm.
know, about the time the spring starts, we get a little bit of winter annuals that really jump up in the spring that we can slow down on our supplement. Then your annual grasses start coming.
Is there any opportunity for grazing like crop residue? I know up here, and even personally, we do corn stalks. I know you said you're in rougher country, so I'm not sure how much farmland is around you.
We don't farm much. We've got a lot of rocks, so we don't farm now. We do have a ranch on the Red River that I started out working there, and they plant a lot of winter pasture and then summer crop cover crops also. And they do get a lot. They have a lot of winter grasses that we don't get on my ranch, and so sometimes they usually have plenty to eat in the winter time, in the fall and spring, and then when they get dry in the summer times, when they have to save forage for the hot summertime to get through. So, but usually in the wintertime, they plant, I don't know, that ranch is probably 3,800 acres, and they'll plant 300 or 400 acres of cover crops, and they run different species on it. They have some goats and some sheep, and then their cows also. But the thing about the cover crops and everything, it's a gamble just like buying hay or anything else. When you buy the hay, it's there. You got it to feed. The cover crops, unless you have irrigation or something, that could be an expense that you're gambling on the weather also. But that is a good supplement to go versus up here in the wintertime, we plant a lot of rye, and that it grows better in the sandy soil. So we have a lot of rye that they plant on the river, and so it's a really good supplement during the wintertime. They don't have to feed as much protein with that, or if any at all on that. So
Do you have any experience with bale grazing?
yes, ma'am. Matter of fact, last year it did start. We did get some snow, and we try not to feed any hay all year long. And we had some hay, some corn stalks we bought about 4 years ago during the drought to try to make it through. And so I had all that hay in the barn, and so when we started supplementing during the snowy weather, we started grinding. We've got a bale grinder, and so we ground hay for those 200 mamas for about 30 days, and we ground on some spots where it was real rocky, shallow soil, didn't have much growth, and so we bale grazed on about, I don't know, 10 acres there for about 30 days, and it's really good for your soil and to help build your soil and keep a cover over the top of the ground. And even in the sandy soils, we don't have a whole lot of sand on this ranch, but even in the sandy soils, that just the impact of the cattle and the hay being tromped in the ground, it's really good for your soil.
How you described bale grazing sounded a little different than what I've heard in the past. So when you're talking about bale grazing, you have a hay processor and you're processing that hay, you're, grinding it up to a degree in different spots in the pasture. How I've also heard bale grazing described is where people are setting bales out on different pastures. Some people set them with ends out, some people tip them, and then they fence them off. And so do you have experience with that as well?
We have done some of that. Years ago, we had a project that we fenced off some bales and stuff like that. But when it's bad weather, and especially in summer, probably in your area where there's sometimes that you're out there trying to chip ice off to get the hay twine or the net wrap off, a lot of people will prepare for that. They'll do their electric fences and go ahead and unwrap their hay, and say they might have a week, 7 days worth of grazing that they don't have to go out there and try to unwrap hay or anything. All they have to do is open a gate. That works really good also.
Your comment about processing that hay in poorer quality locations and being good for the soil, we've seen that as well. We try to do that. We have it's actually cropland around our home pastures, and so we kind of fence that off and try and process hay there, which helps a different enterprise, but same concept.
Right. Me and my dad and I on our place, my dad's still old school, so he likes to bale hay a lot. And so he still fertilizes the hay pastures. But we found that when you take off, when you bale off that acreage, we usually let it grow back up a little bit before wintertime, and then but we try to feed our hay right back in the same place that we baled it, and we unroll it every year on our place. So we just kind of start at one end and keep unrolling it and try to put the nutrients back into the ground that you've taken from, with the cattle and the excess hay that they tromp in the ground. So that's a good idea. I've baled places before and that people just wanted cleaned up, and you keep baling every year and taking off, and then pretty soon there's nothing there to bale, so we always try to put back to where we cut hay off of it, try to put some nutrients back in the ground.
Absolutely. So Chance, we've talked about a few different options to consider, and honestly, geographically, it comes down to, or it sounds like it comes down to producers just being aware of their own challenges, weather systems, and looking into resources in their area and what works for other producers there as well. But on a bigger picture, is there more you want to share as far as what goes into preparing for an extended grazing season? Because you started out saying, that starts with your summer grazing, and that starts with not being overstocked. Do you want to talk about that a little more?
I think that's what you have to, your main goal is you have to know how many animal units that your pastures can handle for even half a year or a full year. A lot of people will run their cows on a certain pasture all summer long and save one to winter graze on, but I really think that rotating your cattle through and knowing what to leave and what to take off is the main key of, I guess, extending your grazing season. The extended grazing season goes back to letting your plants and everything recover. So the worst thing you can do is take them down to where they don't have enough time to recover before it is wintertime and not a growing season. So in the summertime, I think to extend your grazing, you have to graze fast. You have to let that plant have plenty of time to recover. And so on how many acres you have, if you can't let it rest enough, you're probably overstocked. Some people graze everything off during the summertime, and then like you were talking about, they come in and plant cover crops, winter cover crops or whatever, and try to extend their grazing that way also. That can get expensive, and plus you're looking at the weather being 50% part of what goes on there too, so. But I really believe is measuring your pastures and looking to see how much grass you got, and then you'll know how to extend your grazing. You can back off of your grazing, you can speed up, you can stay too long, on some of them.
Chance, is there anything else we haven't touched on that you think is important to bring up with this topic of extended grazing seasons?
I think the main key is knowing how to start off grazing, how to stock it.
All right. Well, Chance, I appreciate your time today. And if people want to learn more, should they just head to Noble's website?
Yes, ma'am. We've got some classes that they can sign up for. We still go to a lot of these classes and participate and learn something new every time we go.
Yes, and your classes you're really spreading out geographically where you're starting to have those, I've noticed.
Yes, we usually, most of our stuff was right here, but they're stepping out of their comfort zone, I guess you'd say, and moving to a few other states and really spreading out. So you can get on the website and find which one is closest to you, and if you wanted to join us, sign up for one. They're pretty good.
All right. Well, folks, I will include that link in the description. Chance, once again, thank you for joining me. And remember, the best way to support this podcast and all your other favorite podcasts is to leave a rating or review. And better yet, share it with a friend who will find this information valuable. Because podcasts still grow best by word of mouth. And with that, happy ranching, folks.